guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. So I've had a request from a few people to share with you guys how I use my white paint pens or a gel pen, but my thought process behind where I decide I'm going to put my white gel pens, how to make sure I'm not going to go overboard and ruin my illustration, and yeah, just to get a good effect from them. So I thought this would be a good page to do it. Now, usually I do my paint pen or my highlight and all that after I finished all my pencil work and before I've put all my glitter and shine to the pages. But while I was doing my pencil work right at the end, I thought this would be a good page to show you guys the white paint pen work. And so I just decided to go ahead and finish off the rest of the glitter and shine and then come on here and share with you the paint pen. So usually I do the paint pen work first because it dries faster than glitter gel pens and metallic gel pens. And so at least once I put there's glitter and shine on, I can leave the page completed aside to dry up properly without having to mess around on the page again. But for today, it's all dried up and I'm going to show you my paint pen work now, or my white highlight work. Now you can use two things, either a paint pen or a gel pen. I usually tend to go for paint pens because I'm able to color over it with pencils a lot easier than with gel pens. Some gel pens don't work with pencil over the top. They will just scrape off. And so if I know that I might use a bit of pencil over the top of the paint pen, I tend to use a paint pen. If I'm not going to use any pencil over the white highlights that I've put, then gel pen is absolutely fine. You can use whatever you prefer. I know some people prefer gel pens. Some people really like the Pentel Signo. Is it this Pentel Signo white gel pen, which never worked for me. I think is it the Sakura white Jelly Roll? Never worked for me. Ohuhu's does work for me actually. This is my third one I'm on. Just that I can't color over it with pencil, but it does work for me. But more than that, the POSCA white paint pen is what I tend to use the most in size 1M. I haven't tried the Thule Arts yet, but I do know from all the colors that they have and I've been using for such a long time that their quality is really good, and I know I can color over it. They're nice and opaque, and I think eventually I will get the Thule Art paint pens to try out in white, but I want to finish all the white gel pens and paint pens that I have at the moment that have been sent for review and things like that before I purchase the Thule Arts in white. If you guys have tried the Thule Arts in white, please let me know what you guys think. Is it nice and opaque? Are you able to color over it? It would be good to know so I know whether to bother trying or not. Okay, so I'm having to record this video another time because a second time. Hopefully it's not going to be a third or fourth time. This is the second time I'm trying to record it. I've had a lot of stress at work, and so my headspace wasn't there. And I realized that when I was doing the paint pen work and trying to sort of talk you guys through my thought process, because my mind wasn't settled, because I wasn't, my headspace, it was a mess. Even the way I was explaining things and going over the page, and I was rambling and I was jumping from bit to bit, and so basically I was not organized. My mind was not organized, so I stopped and I said, okay, let me try and re-record this later. Hopefully it'll be a bit better now. I've taken a little bit of a break and tried to sort of make my mind a bit peaceful and calm down. So hopefully I'll be able to show you a bit better now. So I've done a few white paint pen, a little bit of white paint pen work on this page, but I haven't done much here, so I will show it to you guys on this page. Now, the main concern that the viewers that requested I do this video, the main concern that they raised was, how do you know where to put the white paint pen work, and how do you know you're not going to mess up the page after you've done all your pencil work and overdo it with the paint pen work? To be honest, I don't know. I cannot predict how I'm going to go, but what I do is take things slow. I sort of have a rough order, which I'll share with you guys, of laying down my paint pen work, my white paint pen work, and I sort of follow that order so that I start laying down the white paint pen work and I go through the start adding it onto the page and seeing how it goes before I know whether I need to add more paint pen, white paint pen or not. So I'll sort of share that order with you, and maybe that will kind of help in making sure you don't overdo it, or maybe just giving a little bit of thought of where to put your white paint pen work. All right, so I'm going to try and share that with you guys. Hopefully I'll do it a bit better this time around. Otherwise I'm going to run out of paper and I'll have to do it on a totally different illustration. So first, the thing to share with you would be what elements on a page would you probably consider putting white paint pen work on. And there's a few things. So things like white objects. For example, if you have a white flower, you would probably want to cover up the black lines to help help that particular element look white. So white objects, transparent objects. So bottles, glass, wings, sometimes if you're trying to make them look transparent, crystals, droplets, things like that, water. So there are certain elements that you may think on a page should be sort of transparent. So I would use white paint pen for that. Eyes, I always put my white dots in the eyes to make them look shiny, to make them look glassy, alive, so that they don't look just flat and dead. So white little dots in the eyes always. I use them for highlights and pops of color and pops of highlight as well. So highlight areas and pops of highlight, which I'll discuss, and certain other elements like fur. So if you see there, I've put some lines there, which I'll sort of discuss with you. They're a little bit bright white, but that's because I've used a white paint pen, and I would usually go over those white lines with a bit of color, and I'll show it to you. But usually if I have another color with me, I would use another color, so from my Toolie Art paint pens. But I'm going to do this all with a white paint pen in case you don't have a wide range of colors in paint pens, or maybe you're traveling and you only took your white paint pen, things like that, so that at least you know how to tackle it with a white paint pen. And then if you have a wide range of colors of paint pens, then it's so much easier. It just cancels out the step of having to color over with a pencil. But yeah, so elements such as fur. All right, so I sort of have an order of how I do my paint pen work, and this sort of controls how much paint pen, white paint pen highlights I'm putting to my page, so that I don't overdo it. And I roughly follow these steps in my head. I've actually never really thought of it. It's just sort of happened. But because I was doing this video and I was trying to think, okay, how am I going to sort of explain to you guys my thought process of doing the paint pen work, and that's why I realized, yes, actually I do kind of have an order of doing my white paint pen work. So do I need to zoom in a little bit? Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let's hope that I don't ramble this time and my thoughts and my words are a bit more organized. All right, so the order in which I do my white paint pen work. The first thing I do is look at the most obvious elements that need a white, need me to cover up the black lines or a white highlight. So that is usually my white objects, which on this page I don't have any white objects, and my transparent objects. So first I look around, I'm like, do I have any white objects? So if I had white flowers, for example, I would have covered up the black lines to help make that flower look white. The second thing I look at is, do I have any objects that are transparent? Such as in this case, the crystals. I've done the crystals here, but I'll show it to you on the other page in a second. But the wings on this page are going to be sort of transparent because I've colored it sort of transparent. If I had colored it a little bit more solid, like the gold, for example, gold wings, then I may not need to put as much white paint pen work on the wings. But because I've sort of made it look like it would be transparent, very light wings, I'm going to want to cover up all the black lines there. And then the other thing is droplets. They're water. I would usually personally cover up those black lines. So on this particular page, the entire page, those are the main elements that I would look at first and say, okay, I don't have any white objects. Do I have any transparent objects? Yes, these are the transparent objects, so I would cover those up. And then the next thing I would look at is things like eyes, which I've done this when I colored the eyes. Now, usually when I do eyes, once I've colored the eye, I usually put in my white paint pen work straight away rather than waiting till the end of the page. So a couple of dots in the eyes just to make them look glossy and make them look alive. So I do eyes, and then I look at highlight areas, which I'll discuss in a second. And then I look at areas that maybe I have too much color and I want to break up that color a little bit. So just to break up areas of where I may have lost basically my highlight areas. So I might put a little bit of dots of white or lines. On this page, when I'm looking at it, I think I've got a good contrast between dark areas and highlight areas. But in certain areas, you might find that you've lost your highlight and you want to add in that little bit of a highlight area. So breaking up some areas of color and adding in the highlight. And then finally, right at the end, once I've done those particular white areas, highlight areas, then I would look at the page and say, okay, do I have too much white paint pen work there? If not, and if I need to put a little bit of pops of highlight, then I will go in and put pops of highlight. And that would usually be things like little dots of white paint pen work. So for example, sometimes on the background, on this page, I have a lot of a very light background. But if I had a darker background, you would see me do a few dots here and there just to give a little bit of a pop of highlight to break up all that dark background. Sometimes I do it in the middle of flowers and on certain elements, on petals of flowers, I mean the petals of a flower. So the pops are usually after I've done all the other white highlights and I see, okay, yeah, I could add a little bit more white, and that's when I start doing dots here and there just to increase the highlights, to increase the pop or the wow factor with my paint pen. And I think it really does bring pages to life. All right, so the first thing, number one, do I have any white objects? No, I don't. So I go on to my next one. Do I have any transparent objects? Yes, I do. So I've done the crystals here, but if I show you, if I can bring it into view, there we go. Sorry. I have some crystals down here. So I will go ahead and work on crystals. Now, depending on the objects, you can do some covering up of black lines. For the crystals, I usually tend to just cover up all of the black lines, even the ones which are within the crystal. And then if you wanted to add some color, you could always go in with pencil if you think it's too white, yeah? But usually with my crystals, I don't use my colored 2 art paint pens. I will always use a white paint pen and then see whether I need to just color over certain areas like shadow areas, which I'll show you maybe, with a pencil just to bring back a tiny bit of the shadow. Yeah. So it just helps make an object look transparent. So I would do that for all my crystals on a page. So usually when you have a page with loads of crystals, it takes a while. And usually I show this process on all my color alongs, but I speed it up because it does take a while because you're trying to keep a steady hand. So I tend to go slow, and I enjoy the embellishment stage of my pages because this is where I feel, yes, I've brought the page to life with color, but when I go in and do all my paint pen work, it just brings, I don't know, it just gives a totally different effect to my pages. And so I do love doing this bit. It does take me a while, but I do love spending a little bit of time trying to do my paint pen work. All right, so I would have done my crystals, and depending on the size of the crystals and what kind of effect you want on the crystals. Now, would I have it in this book? Probably not, but depending on the kind of crystals, if you're doing more detailed crystals, I think I have a video actually on how I color crystals, so I'll try and remember to put it in the description box below. But sometimes you can put dots and lines in your crystals. I've kept these crystals very simple because they're quite small, and they're not the main focus on the page, so I didn't need to put too much effort onto it. So yeah, but you could put a few dots and things like that, just since I'm talking about the crystals, just to give that little bit of more shine to your crystals. All right. Okay, so let's just go back to the other page. Okay, so that's how I did my crystals. All right, then the next thing to look at would be other transparent objects is the wings. So when I've made a wing look pretty much transparent, because I've used such light colors, I would say they're pretty much transparent rather than looking very solid. I would usually go in and cover up all the black lines. Now, this is not a very realistic page, and usually on realistic pages, I'd be more, I would try and make sure that things that are transparent or white are definitely covered up with the lines are covered up to help that realistic look. So water, things like that. But even when it's not realistic, it just helps sort of bring the page to life. So you don't have to do it. Just sharing what I do, really. See, POSCA works for me. They just run out too fast, but there we go. All right, so I've covered up the black lines of my wings. Then the next thing would be the water droplets. We have some water. I'm assuming those were water droplets. I colored it as water droplets, and so I would like to cover them up. I think again it'll give a bit of a highlight, but also my mind works that way, that water shouldn't have black lines. So I'm just checking I'm in view. There we go. So now usually within water and water droplets, things like that, you would have a little bit of white highlight areas as well, which actually Hannah Carlson has sort of drawn in there. So I'm just going to give that little bit of a blob of white within the droplet as well. Now, because I had a bit of a shadow area on one side, you can then color over that area and bring it back. If you don't want to lose that little bit of a shadow area, you don't need to do it as dark, but you can color over it and bring it back. Or you could just do a white line on one side where your highlight of your droplet is, on that side. I like doing it all, but I will probably come in and just put a bit of color with my pencils. I'll definitely do that on this video just to show it to you guys. So here I was testing it and I had left the black line on the shadow area, the shadow side, which you could, but I think I like it like that. Yeah, I do like it covered up. So yeah, so that's the second transparent object on this page. Anything else? No, I think that's it. Now the other thing I forgot to mention is to make objects look shiny, and I just realized because I have metal here, I always put white highlights in metal to help make them look shiny, and gemstones to make them look shiny. All right, I'll show it to you again on this page. If you look at the crown, you can sort of see the line. Like I did color, the way I colored with the pencils, I did leave a white, almost white highlight area, but I just went in and put a little stroke of white with my paint pen to make it look even shinier and even more metallic, because metal objects, to help make them look metallic, you need a big contrast between the shadow areas and the highlight areas. So basically the highlight areas should be practically white and you have really dark shadow areas, and that will help make them look shiny, make them look like metal. And so those objects, so if you had that object on the page, I would also tackle those. So if we go back to this side, yeah, okay, so eyes are done. This little spider has eyes. I haven't yet done the dots, so let's put in a dot on the eyes. Yeah, no other eyes on the page. I've done the dots there already. So metal. All right, so we have we have metal here. Now, I don't always cover up the black line. Sometimes I just put the white highlight area in my actual highlight zone. So for example, if we look at this B here, this is the highlight area. So all I will do is just go over the highlight area with the white. So it just makes that highlight area brighter. So a bigger contrast between your dark area and your highlight area, which will make it look shiny. If you want to cover up black lines, you can. So you can sort of go cover up the black lines for your metal in the highlight areas, which will help make it look shiny. So if I come down to this little sort of necklace here, you could cover up in the highlight area that little bit of a black line, the line art, to help make it look shinier. All right. So basically highlight area is where the light is hitting. Yeah. So even on other objects that are not metallic or any of the other objects, I'll come to it, I would be putting my white paint pen work in the highlight areas, in the areas that light would be hitting. All right. So metallic objects as well. All right. So we've done white objects, transparent objects. We've done eyes. We've done metal. Yes. And we have the little gemstone here. Now with red, sometimes the white paint pens pick up the red color and they go pink, but there we go. So wherever there's gemstones, I would usually put a little bit of highlight within the gemstone, again, to brighten up the highlight area and make it look shiny. All right. Okay, so then the next thing I had mentioned is highlight areas. So covering up black lines in the area of a highlight. And this helps with making the element pop. The reason being, you're brightening up, again, that highlight area. As simple as that. So just making sure you can see. Okay. So for example, I go to my leaves now. All right. And I'm looking for my highlight area. So that would be where my pencil work is the lightest, right? So for example, I don't want to, where did I put my white paint pen work there? I don't want to smudge it. They dry pretty fast, but you need to be careful. So if you're looking at that leaf, the dark area is there, the light area is there. So that's the highlight area. That's where the light is hitting. And so you can put your paint pen work there to help with that effect of the highlight. All right. Like I said, nowadays I tend to use colored paint pens. So I would use a very light green to cover up that black line, which would still give a similar effect. Yeah. So this is the highlight area on this leaf. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to try and not take too long, but like I said, this is why in my color alongs, I tend to show you my embellishment stages, but I speed it up because it takes a while to do the entire page with paint pens. And yeah. All right. And sometimes you don't have to do the whole line. If you don't want to, you can just do certain areas. Yeah. So that you don't have too much white paint pen work. So you can pick and choose. So here, I try and limit it to the lightest areas though. So for example, here, I colored it such that it was a bit lighter there. It goes a bit darker. So I'll miss that area and then just put a bit of a highlight in the highlight area again. Yeah, so you can choose whether you want to cover up a whole line or bits of the line. Yeah, so these are my highlight white paint pen work. So paint pen work in the highlight area. So here on this leaf, yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. If I was working on these leaves here, yeah. Now I don't always cover up the black line. So for example, on this leaf here, I have a highlight in the middle vein of the leaf. Yeah, just to help with a bit of shine, I might just put a little bit of a dash of white in that highlight area. It doesn't show up as very obvious when you're looking at it right now, but once you've done that for the whole page, it really does bring it to life. I am finding this very, very bright white because I'm so used to using colored paint pens now. But this is what I used to do at the beginning of my coloring before I had any other colors of paint pens for a long, long time. But I like using, oh, I forgot to color that little bit there, the stem. So I'll have to come in and finish that. I don't buy that many mediums, and I actually really like the Truly Art paint pens, not just for doing this sort of embellishment work on a page, but I also like using it for basing, and I've done videos on that. So I do tend to use them quite a lot, and that's why I like lots of colors. All right, so I would do that for all the leaves here as well. Just pick out all the highlight areas, sorry, here. I've done droplets earlier. This is before I decided to use this page for my how I color for white paint pen work. But even for droplets in the highlight area, so for example, if you look at that one there, in the highlight area where the light is hitting, I would cover up the black line or give it a highlight sort of line to help make it look like water, make it look shiny like water. So you can see I'm not covering up all the black lines. I'm just literally looking at where my highlight areas are and picking those areas to do the paint pen work. Now, usually I do on my stems as well. I'm wondering why I colored my stem like this. I should have put my dark on the bottom, but anyways, say that this area is the highlight area. So I'll put a bit of a highlight on my stems, like yeah, like here as well. See, I think I like doing this bit. All right, so you've sort of got an idea of that. So I would do that with all my leaves. Just look at where the highlights are, cover up, oops, be careful not to smudge. See, I picked up the color on my finger, but cover up the lines in the highlight areas. All right, then other highlight areas. So I'm looking at my flowers now. I've got a good highlight area in my flowers, meaning the petals, I've got a very dark shadow and I've got a good highlight. So again, to help with the pop, I would put in my highlight, cover up the black lines in my highlight areas. So for example, here we have our highlight on that side of the petal, and it will look nice if I cover up that black line. See, I think it really helps. Now here, the black line in my highlight area is sort of hidden away because of the shadow on the petal behind it. But you can always put a bit of a highlight just to brighten up that highlight area where you've done the pencil highlight, yeah? Here as well, it's just brightening up your highlight area. I'm literally just looking for all the areas, all the highlight areas, all the lightest pencil work areas to see whether I want to cover up the black lines in those areas. So that's what I'm literally doing. Yeah. Add a bit of a highlight on that area to brighten it up. We have a very light area there. Let's cover up that one. We have a highlight area here. There we go. Do you see that? Does it look any different? I'm not sure if it does, but yeah, I feel that it does give a totally different effect. The other thing for transparent or white elements would be, yeah, objects that are white. Snow. When you're doing your winter pages, snow is white, pretty much. Like, you don't have black lines marking out snow in nature, so you would also consider covering up black lines for snow. Yeah. So this is how I do my white paint pen work for highlight areas. Yeah, just pick out all the areas that are bright, that are the highlight, and add in a little bit of more highlight by whitening those areas. So either over the pencil work if you don't have a black line there, just to brighten up that highlight, or if there is a black line there, then just covering up the black line. Now, some people, when they're coloring, their style of coloring is such that they cover up all their black lines and then they use color over the top. I don't do that. It's a lot of work, but if you're going to do something like that, rather than just doing it at the end of your page, then I would usually cover up the black lines before coloring. So use something like Winsor & Newton white ink, or some sort of white ink, or what's the other one? I can't remember, but there are some white inks where you can just use a paintbrush and cover up the black line so that it reduces the intensity of the black, and then when you color over with your pencils, it hides the black line. So you could do that from the word go if you like that effect. All right, so that was my highlight areas. Now what I do after that is look for areas where, so for example, even here I sort of left a highlight, so just to add a bit of a pop, I will cover up some black lines in other highlight areas, yeah, not just leaves and flowers. So even on like this sack, even though it's not a shiny element or anything like that, it's not very white, but in those particular areas I will put a bit of white highlight. These flowers here, again, look for your highlight area and cover it up. Okay, now the next thing I did, so first you do your white objects, next you do your transparent objects, do your eyes, do your metal, do your highlight areas. Then the next thing to look at is just look at your page, see how much white you've laid down, and check whether there are any areas that have too much dark color. So say for example, I was looking at a leaf, and I'm just trying to see if I've lost my highlights in any areas. I try and maintain it with my coloring so I don't have to do this stage. I don't think this page has anywhere that I can show you, but say for example you were doing a leaf, yeah, and you lost this highlight area. You didn't, you were coloring, you didn't manage to keep the white highlight area or keep the highlight area very light, so you've basically pretty much got a dark area. Then I would say I would use a bit of white paint pen or colored paint pen, but to give it bring back your highlight, okay? Just help with the pop, for example. So it's not really dark, but if you look at that little bit there, you don't have as bright a white highlight area as you do on some of the leaves. It's really hard to explain, but it would help to just put a bit of white there. All right, so just bring back your highlight areas in areas where you might have lost it. All right, I unfortunately don't have that on this page, so I can't really show that to you. Sorry. Okay. But yeah, if you find that you have an object where you've got your dark shades, you've got your midtones, but you've sort of lost that highlight area, just putting a bit of dashes of white will sort of break up all the color you have. So you can just do dashes. You don't have to cover the black line if you don't want to, but you just do sort of dashes within that element to help bring back the highlights or just break up the color. All right, so breaking up the dark areas with pops of brightness. All right, then finally, well, not finally actually, then we're looking at elements such as fur. All right, let me move this so we can see. Now I like to do some strokes in my fur to help make it look more fluffy, and it really does, I feel. My fur work has still got a long way to go, but I feel that when I do paint pen work on it, it sort of helps. Now, so I look at my element or my animal on the page, and I look at where I would want to first put the highlights again. So just like I was doing the highlight areas for leaves and flowers, things like that, other objects, I would also look at things like areas on an animal which is not fur. So like the nose, highlight area. So I would put at the point of the nose right there. I would look at their feet, for example, so the highlight areas. Just give it a bit of Hopefully this video is a bit more organized. I still feel like I'm rambling on, but it's better than what I had recorded previously, trust me. All right, so the tail here, this is the highlight area. This is where the light is hitting. So I like to, if I've kept it really, really light, especially like here, that part of my tail is very light. It's, I think I used Light Fresh and Ivory with my Albrecht Duras. So I like to cover it up. There we go, yeah? So there we go. But I nowadays use paint pens, colored ones, but that's fine as well. All right. Then I look at it and say, any other highlights areas? Okay, let's do a bit on the hand here. The light would be hitting there. This part of this finger. It's not a finger, I don't know. But there we go, okay? Just a few highlight areas. Then I would say, okay, I like this here. I haven't done the whiskers yet. I always do my whiskers of animals at the end in case I'm doing highlight areas of fur. So for example, here is a highlight area, so I've decided to cover that up. This is a light area on the ear, so I will cover that up a little bit. Yeah. And then here, light would be hitting there, so cover up that. Yeah, so any areas that look like the light is hitting, or you've sort of colored it such that there's a highlight, you can put in some paint pen work. All right. Usually the top of my head is quite dark, but yeah, I'm not going to put a highlight on there because I've colored it quite dark, so I don't need to put a highlight area. So usually I look at the animal. This is quite hard, but I look at the animal and I see where the lightest areas of fur is and see whether I can put a white highlight. So like I did over there on the ears, I could have done it a bit neater, but on the belly, I've kept it quite light. So what I would do is I would usually just cover up the black lines there. Again, fur in real life doesn't have a black outline. So there we go. So I like to cover up the fur elements as well. Now I won't cover it up there. It's in shadow from this backpack. So I don't need to put a white highlight there. It will look quite strange. It'll look out of place and you will lose your shadow area. So I'm not going to put a white highlight to cover up the black lines there. But you can in other areas that are looking quite light to help with the fur effect in a way as well. But I would usually do this. So for this particular mouse, I would have used a gray so that it's not too bright white, but you can see it looks nice, doesn't it, when you cover up the black lines. So yeah, I look at the areas with the lightest fur and I see whether covering up the fur in those areas is a good idea. And if it looks like it'll look good, if it's a very light area, I will usually cover up the black lines with a paint pen. Yeah. All right. Then the other part I do with paint pen is, sorry, I'm just going to put a bit of white here, but not all the way because that's in a shadow. I shouldn't tinker too much. All right. Then the other part I like to do is do strokes of fur. Now, again, I would use a gray, but I will show you how I go over with pencils. So I literally just follow the fur lines and I just do random anywhere, literally anywhere. And this is just to, if you do it random, it's better because it makes it look more fluffy. I mean random in random areas, but in the direction of your fur, yeah? Don't go in a totally different direction. Try and sort of keep it roughly in the same direction, yeah? So I wouldn't have gone that way, for example, pointing towards the backpack. I sort of kept it with the fur direction roughly. You can go a little bit off just to help with the fluffiness of the fur, which I do tend to do, but I wouldn't go in a totally different direction unless you want to make it look scruffy, unless you want the fur to look scruffy. That's different, yeah? Now with Hannah Carlson's pages, yeah, her fur lines are quite dark, like the edges. Like in certain books, Emily Liderhall-Oberg, I think she does her animals with little strokes as the outline. That really helps to do your fur work for the outline. Kinoko Igusa, I think her outline of animals is a bit different, whereas with Hannah Carlson it's quite solid lines. So you can sort of either go over the lines like I did, or you can do sort of fur strokes at the edges. So for example, here where my tail is, instead of following the fur line completely, you can sort of do little strokes like that, yeah, to help with the fluffiness. But we're talking about the fur here. So there we go. So I've put in some strokes of fur, which will help with making the animal look nice and fluffy. All right. And then what else? I think, see, I would use my gray, but I find these bits quite solid for fur. I find it quite hard with Hannah Carlson's pages sometimes to make, well, I find it a challenge making fur look realistic anyways, but I find it more of a challenge in Hannah Carlson's work. Some people are able to do such beautiful work with Hannah Carlson, with skin and with animals and stuff, but you could always cover all that up, like I said, with Winsor and Newton white ink, and then redo it if you have that skill level. I don't, that's why I never do that. I just come in and do the paint pen work. So here we have the ear. Again, you can put a bit of strokes of white paint pen, and think about where you're doing it. So for example, the fur on the body is a bit longer, so you can do longer strokes. But if you're doing it on the face, for example, you'd probably do really tiny strokes. And if you're doing it on the ear, you'd probably do smaller strokes as well. So think about where you're doing it, just like your fur work. Long strokes in areas that have longer fur, smaller strokes in areas which have less fur. All right, so that's what I would do. So animals are done. Now I could go away and first finish off all these elements that I've mentioned, because it'll be too long for you guys to watch me do it, and then come back and show you, okay, this is what the page looks like. Now the last thing I look at after I've done all of that would be, do I need to add pops of highlight anywhere else? And I've just noticed actually that my stones, I think I want to put a emphasize the highlights in my stones. Can you see the stones? Yes. So this is going back to where the highlights are for the petals and leaves that I did. I'm just adding white in the highlight areas of my stones as well, covering up the black line in the highlight areas, which again just helps, I don't know, it helps make things pop, bring it to life. So that's another element where I would put in highlight areas, yeah. I mean, cover up the black line in highlight areas. All right, so let me go and finish off the paint pen work like I've just explained you for all of these elements, and then I'll be back with you to see whether we need to add any more pops of color. And we can do that, and then I can show you how I do any pencil work, and how I think about whether I need to do pencil work or not. So yeah, let me go ahead and finish off the things that I mentioned. So transparent objects, all of those are done, the droplets and the crystals. Let me zoom out a bit. So white objects we don't have. Transparent objects were the droplets, the crystals, the wings, which I've done. Then what did I say? Eyes. I've done my dots in my eyes. Metals, I've done the highlights in my metals. Then I look at the highlight areas. So I've done it on some of the leaves, the flower petals, and I'm going to go ahead and do it for the rest of the page off screen. And then fur, I've done the fur elements, the animal basically. I don't have any dark areas that need to have the highlight brought back, so I've not had to do that, but I would do that as well. And that's it. So let's go and finish that off screen, and I'll be back to discuss whether I need to. I'll show you what it looks like with this much white on it. So these are the main elements. that I put white highlights on, or white pops of paint pen on, and then I can come back, show you how much white we have on the page, and then we assess whether we need to add anything else with our white paint pens. All right, I'll be right back. Okay guys, so I've done my white paint pen work in exactly the same order as I told you guys, and that's all the white paint pen on the page. Now hopefully you can see that it does make a difference. It does give a bit more of a pop and makes the page even more alive than it is just with the color. So for example, on those leaves there, and if you compare those leaves to the ones where we've put some white highlights in the highlight areas, they pop a little bit more than those ones. Hopefully you think so. But yeah, I've done all my paint pen work, so I've done it in exactly their areas that I had mentioned. So then I step back and I look at the page and I see, okay, so all the most obvious areas have got their paint pen work done. Do I need to add any more pops of white to the page? And in this case, like I said, because my background is actually quite light, I don't need much pops of color in the background. I always look at my background first, because when I have really dark backgrounds, I don't know if I will have any in. Sometimes if it's snow or things like that. So I can show you this page. Where is it? This is quite an early page actually. And I think now when I look at it, I would add little pops of white. So when I say pops of white, just little dots to just brighten up the background a little bit. Do I have any others in this book? These ones are the winter pages, so that's a totally different reason why I would do white for falling snow. But at the same time, it just helps with brightening up your very dark background. Do you see that? If I didn't have any white there, if I decided not to do falling snow and I just decided to leave it as it has snowed and the snow has sort of settled on everything, and I just left the background purple, it would look quite a lot flatter without the little white highlights. So here I've done some white dots with the paint pens, but then I also came in and did sprinkling of Winsor & Newton whiting. But that white in the background just sort of brightens up the background. So yeah, I do like to do that for my backgrounds. This is a book, this is my first Hannah Carlson book, so I've got very early pages in here, so it's very hard to sort of show you what I do nowadays. All right, but basically, if I had a dark background, I would look at the background first and say, okay, do I need to break up the background a bit? Do I need to add some brightness to it, like I just showed you in the winter page, and just do dots, random dots here and there. All right, so that's one thing I look at. The other thing I look at for pops of color would be, for example, the flowers. I feel the center of the flowers, yes, I've done some glitter gel pen work, which is nice, but when you take a photo of that, it looks quite flat. So I will only it's only me who's going to enjoy it. Sorry if you can hear some noises. It's morning. I woke up quite early actually, like I normally do, but it seems like everyone else is waking up now, so it's becoming a bit noisy upstairs. But anyways, obviously when I flip the pages, I'm going to enjoy the sparkle on the page, but when I take a photo, for example, for Instagram, you won't see that. You'll look at it and see sort of flat coloring. All right, so what I like to do is sometimes add little dots of color here and there to just give those little pops. So if I zoom in, all right, on the video it looks absolutely fine, but because of the shine, but if I zoomed in now, because it's glitter gel pen, you might have to do more than one sort of dot. So like basically it can fade. So if I do it on this flower here, what I would do is either do a little dash of white or do dots, but I wouldn't do it on all of the circles. I would do it just randomly, just to give it a bit of interest, just give pops of highlight. But you can see that the white is not that bright at the moment. It's because it's on a glitter gel pen and you might have to go over it. So if I just make sure that my paint pen is well shook. I only started using this POSCA pen and it already feels like it's getting empty. Okay, hopefully I don't get a blob now. but it soaks in a bit onto the glitter gel pen. So what I tend to do is, if I'm doing it over glitter gel pens rather than just pencil, when you do it over pencil, it would be nice and bright like everything else, and it'll show up a lot better. But because I've done glitter gel pens in the centers, it sort of soaks in and just gets faded. So I would let it dry and then I would just go over it again. So that would be some pops of white. You can even do it sort of on the centers of the flower, just little dots, you see, that will just give it a bit of a highlight area, a bit of interest. So that's what I mean by pops of the white highlight. So centers of the flowers, sometimes some people like to do it on other elements. So say, for example, on a leaf, if you felt like doing it, you could put in some pops of white if you feel you don't have enough highlight on the page, yeah? I don't always do this stage. I tend to look at my background and first put the pops of white in my background, and usually that's enough. With all the other white paint pen work I have done, that is usually enough, but my background is quite bright, so I don't need to do that. And I'm just showing you other ideas that might go through your mind, or so you can do it on your petals, just to give a bit of interest again, little pops, yeah. Just randomly really, and you don't need that much, but this is the stage I do this bit, and this is where you can sort of go overboard. But yeah, so definitely the centers are just soaking in. Oh, the page is colored on the other side, but usually when I do the centers with pencil, it works better. But yeah, I would always look at the center of my flowers, for example, and see whether I can do those little random little dots. And again, on things such as these, again, randomly, you can just put some here and there. On these centers, again, these are all glitter gel pens I've used on these elements, so it's not going to show up as good for you guys. What else? I think that's basically it. So I would just look at your page, see if you haven't got too much white yet and you can add a little bit more of highlight, then just randomly go around on your background, add little dots of white randomly, white dots, white circles, and then once you've done that, look at other elements that you might want to just add a little bit of shine or sparkle to. When I say sparkle, not glitter and not metallic pens or glitter gel pens, but with your white. Because it's white, because it's a highlight, it will just sort of give a bit of a pop, yeah? So you can do that randomly. Now, I don't always do this, like I said, but just to show you guys that, you know, just go with the flow. Just see that if you can add some white here and there, just go for it. All right. So that's what I mean by pops of white. Hopefully that shows. Yeah, you can see it on that flower. I was a bit off screen for the rest, but yeah, there we go. All right. So let me zoom you out. Okay, so that's the paint pen work done. All right, I think that's enough because I have such a bright background. I don't need to add that much brightness to the page, but when you see that you have quite a dark page, then you can add pops of color just to brighten it up. Okay, I haven't done this page completely yet. Now on this page, let me summarize. So the first thing I look at with the white paint, because I've finished the white paint pen work, I just want to show you the pencil work and where I would think of doing a bit of pencil work if I have used a white paint pen. This stage is not required if you use colored paint pens, but if you use white paint pens, just to smooth things out a little bit, I'll show it to you. But just to summarize the white paint pen work, the first thing we look at is white objects. Do we have any white flowers? Do we have any white clothing? Things like that. So white objects. Transparent objects, so wings, crystals, water droplets, water, ice, snow, things like that, glass, those kind of elements. Eyes, yeah, number 3, eyes. Look at your animals, look at your insects, see where you can put the pops of white on the eyes. Then you're looking at metallics, so give that shine to your metals, make it look like metal. It looked a bit better here because it's a slightly larger object, but you can see the metal, and it's all done with just pencil, but a bit of white highlight just helps with that. So metals, then highlight areas. So look at all your areas of highlight that you've left with your pencils, and then see if you want to cover up the black lines in the highlight areas just to emphasize your highlight areas, give it that little bit of pop, a bit of more interest. Once you've done all of that, you've already got down quite a bit of white paint pen. Then you look at any elements that might be too dark, you've lost your highlight areas, you want to add a little bit of a highlight. You can go into those elements, add a tiny bit of highlight, either with dots, either with lines, but just brighten up those very dark elements if necessary. And then finally, you've already got down so much white again, like I said, then you see whether you need to add any more pops of white. So look at areas that you can add the white. So like the background, a few dots here and there, like the petals, I've done a few dots here and there on your leaves if you want, on the center of your flowers, things like that. Just look for areas that you might just add a few dots here and there to add the little pops of more highlight. All right, so that's my explanation of how I think about my white paint pen work, where I lay it down, how I control myself from going over the top. All right, now, because I've used white paint pen, I just want to show you that, like I said, I don't use a white paint pen for everything that much nowadays. For example, my leaves, I would have used green, a very light green. For these particular purple flowers, I would have used a very light purpley pink. I would have used a gray for the fur. So, but if you don't have that and you have used a white paint pen like I have today, how do I neaten it out a little bit, I would say, and make sure it's not too stark white. All right, so for example, in my fur, that's a bit white. It's sort of for the fur. So if I zoom in, you can see those white strokes a bit too much. It's too white for the fur that I have done. So what I would do after I've done my strokes, because I've used white paint pen, I'll come in with a couple of grays, usually quite light, because I don't want to cover up the white highlight that much. I just want to reduce the bright whiteness of it, but I still want it to look a bit highlighted. Yeah, so I've got a warm gray 3 so that it's not too dark. Let's see if that works. So what I would do is literally just go over the white, and because I've used a paint pen and not a gel pen, it's not scraping off. You have to check with your whatever paint pens you use though. I know this works with my POSCA. I know it works with my Thule Arts. I can just color over it. Arctic's acrylic markers, I can. But like I showed you, the Ohuhu gel pen, that would just scrape off. So it would be pointless. Yeah, so I just literally quickly, you don't have to spend too much time on this. And I'm not coloring too hard, just a, you know, light pressure really. I'm just trying to lay down a little bit of pigment, gray pigment, to reduce the whiteness of the fur. That area is nice and white on the belly. I don't need to go over it with the gray, but maybe the shadow area here. Yeah, wherever you think that it's too white and it's standing out too obviously as a white flick, I would just sort of go over. So it still shows up as fluffy. It still looks like a slight highlight area because it's just lightened, because you've got a color over white, it's a bit lighter than the surrounding fur. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So now I had done the ear, but the transition between a highlight area into a dark area is where things look a little bit messy with a white paint pen. And that's what I like to do when I come in with a pencil. I'll show it on the leaves and petals a bit. I think that will be a bit easier to show it to you on. But I'm basically doing that here, just neatening up the transition between this line art here and into the highlight area that I've put the white highlight. Just reducing the whiteness again. Just literally going over the white paint pen. You don't have to do this stage if you like the bright whiteness. I like it to look a little bit more natural, especially when the object is not white. Obviously, if the object was white, I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm not going to do it, for example, on the wings. All right. So the fur, that's what I would do. I would just go over the white lines so that it's not as white, but it still looks fluffy. It still looks like highlight strokes sort of thing. Yeah, all right. So I used a warm grade 3 for that, so not a very dark grade. Then, so that's one thing, just reduce the whiteness of a page. Then the other thing I like to do is look at my transitions. So where can I show you on screen that you can see easily? For example, look at this petal here. You can see where my white line with the highlight, with the white paint pen starts, right? Just to neaten that up, to make it, I know I'm a perfectionist. I like to make sure everything, I have OCD basically, okay? So you don't have to do this. This is an extra stage, and this is probably why it takes so long with my pages. But when you're zoomed out, you won't really notice that much. So on a photo that you take for your Instagram, you might not notice that, but I notice it. And so it bothers me. So I do tend to zoom in on certain elements and notice, okay, that looks a bit messy to me. I don't like that transition. I need to smooth that transition out. So I'm going to take the light blue that I used on that element, on that petal, to help me blend in the transition. So I'm using it's so tiny, I can't remember, a light ultramarine. Okay, arbitrum pencils, guys. And I will just go over the area where the transition is happening. Can you see how that just looks a little bit neater, hopefully? What about here? So basically all the transitions you can do that too. I'm trying to look at the camera at the same time, so sorry if my voice is changing. Just to see that it's obvious to you guys where these transitions are. So here, the transition between the dark area or the line art and going into the light, it just smooths that out, makes it look neater. Here, there would be a bit of a shadow, which we've lost because of the white paint pen. So just adding that little bit of blue over the paint pen just helps with bringing back that shadow and smoothing out that transition. Look at that. Looks so much more neater. But those of you who don't want to waste time doing this, you don't have to. I'm just showing you what I do. So if you find that things are too white, things are a little bit messy, the transition is a bit too obvious, and you want to blend in that transition, or you want to bring in a little bit of shadow back, you can do that. So for example, on my gemstones, I left a bit of a black area there, but if I look at here, am I in shot? No. So here where the fingers are, I did a white highlight, and I've lost that little bit of shadow that would be created by the fingertips. So I can put in a bit of shadow over that white line to bring it back. Yeah. So if I go back to the crystals that we did here, we've lost our shadows. That would be sort of where it's seating inside that little pocket. So I'll take my color and just bring in a bit of, just reduce the whiteness is enough to bring back that shadow for a transparent object, for example, for these crystals. Yeah. These crystals are sitting behind, so they would have a transition. Hopefully this sort of makes sense, yeah? Bring back, I haven't finished this page with the white paint, but I didn't want to waste too much time and not get this video out to you guys. All right, so I've shown you how to neaten that up. Let's do the leaves. Let's see how we would neaten up the leaves. So for example, here, you can see the sudden stop of my white paint pen. I want to smooth out that transition, make it look a little bit more natural. See? Does that help? I only do this when I'm using a white paint pen, or I'm using a very light green and I've sort of gone into the shadow area and I just want to smooth out that transition. I'll take a light green, for example, in pencil and just sort of go over it to smooth out that transition. I don't usually need to do it as much with my colored paint pens, so it does help using them to just sort of miss that step. So yeah, when you're using white, that white line where you stop and start is very obvious. So using your pencil just to go over it does help. And of course, if you wanted to go over the whole line and you didn't want it white at all, you can just literally color over the whole line. Do you see that? So now it looks more natural. It's not white, it's green, but that's the beauty of using a white paint pen. You don't need all the colors of paint pens. You can do a white, an ivory, and just sort of color over it so easily to give whatever color you need, yeah, with your pencils. And so if you're not someone who wanted to collect lots of paint pens, I would say have a white, have an ivory. So two very light colors, use those, and you can always, in areas that you want to bring back color, just color over it so easily. Yeah. Here, there should be a bit of a shadow because it's going behind that object. So now with these flowers, with these flowers here, it looks too white to me. Do you see that white line? It does not look perfect for me. So I'm just going to bring in a very light pink, and I'm just going to do the transition there. See? And that just helps. Like, I'm not doing the whole line, the white line. I'm not going over the whole white line, just certain spots. And that just helps with reducing that white, obvious white sort of highlight that you've put there. You see? Doesn't that look better? That transition. See? So you still have your highlight. You've just reduced that sudden change. So if I go down, bring the other one back into view. Zoom out a bit. Okay. So here, that transition. Yeah. So that's what I do with my pencil. So if I'm going to use a white paint pen, I like to neaten up those transitions a bit because it makes it look more natural. It makes it look better. Yeah, sorry. So it makes the transition more smooth. So when you take a photo, for example, you'll sort of have the effect of the highlights, but it won't be obvious to someone that you've done a white line there, you see? So you have the effects when I've zoomed out, you can sort of see that there's some white highlight, there's nice pops of highlight areas, but you can't see the obvious white line because we've just smoothed out those edges. So neaten up those lines. If you are using a white paint pen with a little bit of color, it doesn't take too long because you just need to put a little bit. And any areas that are too obviously white, like the fur, so you can still see that it looks fluffy, but you can't see the obvious white lines like you can see on this one. You see, it just looks like part of your fur. It looks fluffy, it looks furry, but it doesn't look just white lines. So yeah, hopefully this video has been helpful. I've summarized a few times how I sort of think about how to apply the white paint pens, and that sort of helps me when I go in that order of white object, transparent objects, eyes, metal, gemstones goes with metals, fur, and then highlight areas, and then breaking up any areas that are too dark, and then finally pops of white if necessary. That will control how much white you're putting down on the page and make sure you hopefully don't go overboard. And you can always tone down the whiteness. So if you think you have gone a bit overboard, you can use the pencils to tone it down a bit or to smooth things out and make them not look as obvious that you've put a white line on that leaf, for example. Or there, that just smoothing out that transition makes it look like you've not done it very obviously. All right, so hopefully this has helped you guys. And yeah, for those of you who had requested it, sorry it took me a while to get to it, but I thought this was a perfect page to do it because I had all these different elements that I could share with you guys. Now I can go ahead and finish this side, and then my double page spread is done, guys. Did I start it in June? I can't even remember when I started it, but I'm so glad. It's been such a long time since I've done a double page spread for Hannah Carlzon, and this was my first Hannah Carlzon book, so it's so nice to see this done, and I used to always admire this page. I do like this, how this page has turned out. I'm just not sure if there's anything missing. Is it too light, the background? But I don't think I want to go ahead and darken it. I think I'm going to call it done now. I do like how it's turned out. So yeah, I'm excited that I finally got a double page spread done. All right, guys, I have a couple of bits though that I've forgotten to color, like this stem here. And was there a stem somewhere here? Where was it? Where was it? Here, right here. It's very tiny. You wouldn't even know. Someone else wouldn't even notice it. I notice it, and because I've noticed them, I'm going to have to color them in. But yeah, I really enjoyed sharing this video with you guys because I've never really put thought to exactly how I'm doing it, but I did realize that I actually do have a thought process. It was just not a very conscious one. It was very sort of subconscious, and I just, when I sat down to think about it for this video, I realized, yes, I actually have a flow of how I do my white paint pen work, and hopefully that helps you guys. All right, guys, I've rambled on a lot, and hopefully it was a bit more organized the second time around I recorded it. Even if it's not, it'll be coming out to you guys. So I apologize, all right, if it was not very well thought out, but I've had a lot of stress recently, and yeah, my headspace is not sort of in the right place at the moment. All right, guys, I'll leave you to it, and I'll be back with you guys again soon. So until the next video, take care, thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.